Why did the Vatican request to meet with Grand Ayatollah Sistani, and why now? Is this a mere courtesy visit among the many other meetings planned in the Pope's visit to Iraq? Or is there a deeper interest in the Ayatollah and the faith group that he represents? Between the followers of these two giants, there are over 1.5 billion people watching. Catholicism and the Roman Catholic Church are deeply rooted in the Western psyche and are seen as one of the most formidable and longest-standing religious institutions in the Western world. Shia Islam and the spiritual leadership of Shia Muslims, however, may still remain obscure to most of the West. To learn more about this historic meeting with the Grand Ayatollah and on Shia Islam, order your copy of the new book, The Pope Meets the Ayatollah, An Introduction to Shia Islam, available now on Amazon.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Respected viewers, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're really excited to have this program with you, a discussion and a conversation around the historic, momentous, remarkable meeting between the Pope and the Ayatollah, that is Pope Francis and the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Husseini Sistani in Najaf al-Ashraf. A historic moment for a number of reasons, and with us here are a group of panelists who are experts to discuss this very historic moment and its significance on the global stage, relating to Christian and Muslim relations, as well as relations related to harmony, peace, and the betterment of our entire world. Given this, I would like to move directly into this conversation with our respected panelists by introducing our first panelist, Dr. Hassan Abbas. Dr. Hassan Abbas is a professor of international relations and a writer based in Washington, D.C. He also serves as a senior advisor at Harvard University's program on Shiaism and global affairs at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. His new book, coming out just this week, is entitled The Prophet's Heir, The Life of Ali ibn Abi Talib, published by Yale University Press, something we're all looking forward to. Professor Dr. Abbas, if I can come to you on this idea, given the work that you've done in this space for quite some time, and also the book that you've highlighted here, and really the ethos, this meeting took place in Najaf, in the holy city of Najaf in Iraq, and I just wanted to get, based on all your understanding of this global region and the international approach, what is the significance of this meeting on the international global stage, this meeting between Pope Francis and the Grand Ayatollah Sistani? How would you like to comment on that, please?
Thank you so much. First, I'm very thankful to the organizers and also to share my thoughts on this very critical day. I think, as you have rightly mentioned, this is in a way unprecedented. This is also remarkable given the times of polarization globally, the right versus the left, the religious versus secular, and in the age of pandemics, where most states and the leaders are confining themselves to their own constituents. In that arena, for two important leaders to come together, meeting in a very humble format, no huge protocols, that in itself is so important, setting the stage globally for people to tell people this is how to come together, and we need to come together. So there's one significance of messaging, and the religious leadership, I think, is showing that they have taken a step, showing the pathway to the political leaders of the world also. Secondly, the city of Najaf, just at the door of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salam, it's so significant because that's the door to knowledge, that's the door to wisdom, that's the door which was opened by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And Ali, being his follower and his reflection, shows that if you have to come together, the road to tolerance, the road to inclusivity, the road to knowledge and scholarship comes here. So this was significant. This meeting, if had happened elsewhere, all important cities, whether any capital or any other official residence, would have no such relevance as it is here. So it is about being inclusive, and the message that has come out is of emphasis on social justice, emphasis on people who are refugees, who are persecuted, whether intellectually in terms of freedom of speech or in any other sense. So it is remarkable for its message, global message that it stands for. Thank you.
Lovely, lovely. And by the way, just for our audience, the book is launching this week. Do check out The Prophet's Heir, that's been published by Yale University by Dr. Hassan Abbas. I think you'll be delighted by it. It makes a significant contribution to the field, especially from the Western perspective on the view of Imam Ali, something that has not been discussed. Inshallah, hopefully we can hear about that more in a moment. I'd like to come to our other panelists, Sayyid Hassan Al-Hakeem and Hajj Jalal Moughania, these two remarkable individuals who have written a great work that contributes as well to the field from, albeit perhaps a different vantage point and a very important vantage point in terms of this historic visit between the Pope and Ayatollah Sistani, or the meeting between the Pope and Ayatollah Sistani. And in particular, an introduction to Shia Islam, the tenets of what Islam is about. And in fact, this meeting what we'll perhaps find, and our audience will perhaps find, is this is part and parcel of the ethos of the Ayatollah and the Hawza and Shia Islam at large. That is harmonious, peaceful relationships with everyone, with all people and all of mankind. And although it may not come to the light, and this is perhaps what we'll understand from our respective panelists. If I can come to Sayyid Hassan Al-Hakeem first, who perhaps needs no introduction, giving his scholarly lineage, as well as himself being a student of the Hawza as well, and someone who has been contributing in numerous capacities to the Shia community from a very young age, him as well as his family. There's much to say. I don't want to go into the depths. You can also consider getting the Pope Meets the Ayatollah, the book that's just been published. You can get in Kindle form, and you can also get the hard copy. You can get this on Amazon. I would highly encourage you to do that. And you can get the brief on Sayyid Hassan there as well. But Sayyid Hassan, if I may come to you with respect to the significance of this meeting, could you kind of shed some light on this idea? Why is this meeting so important, and why now? What is the build-up and the lead-up to this meeting between Pope Francis and Samahat Sayyid Sistani? Your thoughts, Sayyidina, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Sayyidina. Assalamu alaikum, dear respected Dr. Abbas and Hajj Jalal. It's really an honor to be amongst you in this panel. This meeting and what's described and what we described and what the world described as a historic event of high significance that happened in the holy city of Najaf, the Pope visiting our dear beloved the Grand Ayatollah Sistani, the descendant of our beloved Imam Ali, and the carrier of the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt, and the person who's now at the top seat, academic seat of the Islamic seminary of the holy city of Najaf, which is a leading seminary amongst all the other seminaries of Shia Muslims, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt globally, bring the significance of what this seminary carries and what this system or institution of Marja'iyya actually carries in terms of values and coexistence and human values, and how this institution plays a major role in bringing peace to the world. If we look post 2003, and specifically I'm mentioning post 2003 because pre 2003 the regime in Iraq was a regime that put lots of limitation and persecuted the seminary and the scholars in the seminary, and they were not able actually to show their intellectual value. If we look at all the positions that the Grand Ayatollah Sistani and the Maraja amongst him in the holy city of Najaf and other seminaries of the carriers of Ahlul Bayt thoughts they presented to the world, and how much that played a major role in bringing peace to the world. And we can see all these positions that probably there's no time for me to mention here, and specifically the latest one, which is played a major role in defeating ISIS and fighting terrorism and protecting all the sects and all the ethnicities in Iraq. That's the significance of this visit. When we see in the statement of the Vatican City, when the Pope came, he thanked the Grand Ayatollah and his followers, the Shia Muslims amongst them, for voicing and standing in protection of, and here I'm paraphrasing, protection of the Christians and the other minorities in Iraq. This shows that the value of this seminary and the carriers of the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt in today's world, what they bring to the world from the peace aspect and from the coexistence aspect, and what value they have globally.
Very wonderfully said. I really appreciate that, Sayyid Hassan. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts and insight and summarizing a very, very momentous moment in a few words. Thank you so much. Coming to our next panelist, Hajj Jalal Moughania. Hajj Jalal is an American lawyer and researcher. Jalal Moughania is an author of a new and timely book, along with Sayyid Hassan, Pope Meets The Ayatollah, An Introduction to Shia Islam, Amazon's #1 bestseller on Shia Islam. He has written and translated original works on Islam and religious authority in Shiism, including The Marja'iyya, A Candid Conversation by Grand Ayatollah Muhammad Sayyid Al-Hakeem. Hajj Jalal, welcome. Thank you for joining us, inshallah. If I can jump straight into it, what's expected from this meeting between the Pope and Ayatollah Sistani? There's been a lot leading up to it. The meetings happened as well. But what can one expect from this meeting? If you could shed some light on that, we'd really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sayyid Shabir, for that excellent question. And I want to say it's an honor and privilege to be on this panel with dear respected Dr. Hassan Abbas and dear respected Sayyid Hassan Al-Hakeem, and with yourself, dear Sayyid Shabir. With regards to what's expected from this meeting, even anticipating this meeting and something that we shed light on in the book and providing a comprehensive background to this historic meeting between Pope Francis and Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani, the fact that this meeting not even just took place, but the fact that this meeting was announced was historic. The fact that these two giants were coming together was a declaration in itself. Some people were analyzing the visit to see if a document would be signed between the Pope and Grand Ayatollah Sistani, and we actually shed light on this in the book that there was no need for a document to be signed, because the fact that the leading figure in Shia Islam today, in Sayyid Ali Sistani and Pope Francis came together to meet in such a critical time in today's world was monumental. And there's a lot that can be taken away from this. The message for coexistence, the message for tolerance and moderation. Grand Ayatollah Sistani has been one who has time and time again throughout his tenure and his leadership position has been one to stand for the equal protection of all Iraqis, for all people, and making sure that people were protected regardless of their creed, their faith, and their background. And the Pope's visit to Grand Ayatollah Sistani in his home in the holy city of Najaf was a testament to this acknowledgement of the Grand Ayatollah. And like Sayyid Hassan Hakim mentioned so eloquently, that this is coming from an institution of Marja'iyya, of the Islamic Seminary, of the Hawza, that has a history of positions for coexistence, for tolerance, and for moderation that has existed for about 1,000 years since the establishment of the Islamic Seminary in 1050 AD in the holy city of Najaf.
Very wonderfully stated. I really appreciate that insight. And I should also highlight, if I'm not mistaken, there's an introduction in the book from Ayatollah Sayyid Munir al-Khabbaz, who is a student of Sayyid Sistani. And perhaps you can get a reflection of the thoughts and the teachings of Sayyid Sistani in his student, at least a glance of it. And that's something that's noteworthy. And I appreciate that insight of, it's part and parcel of the ethos of the Hawza and its students to have balance, harmony, moderation. And these are not new. These are things that have been throughout times. Perhaps they may not have been marketed. And also the historic nature of the Hawza of Najaf. In fact, some have argued that along with the Qaraween and Fez, it's one of the oldest institutions of Islamic learning or global learning throughout history with its long heritage. I really appreciate that insight, Hajj Jalal. If I can come to Sayyid Hassan Abbas as well on this. We talk about Iraq and we talk about the meeting happening there, but these actually branch much further than Iraq in the region and beyond. The Pope represents a huge, substantial amount of people in the world, as does Ayatollah Sistani. Could you shed some light on the dynamics of the significance of this meeting in Iraq, but also beyond those borders, the regional significance of this meeting and its relation to security in the region, and perhaps even counterterrorism? Being your expertise, you could probably shed some light on that. We'd really appreciate it, Dr. Abbas.
Thank you so much. I think this is an extremely important point, not only for the region, but globally as well. We have seen sectarian tensions. We have seen violence across the region. We have seen violence across the world. And in that scenario, a little bit of background, if I may, in a minute or so, with the role of Grand Ayatollah Sistani, right at the beginning of 2002, 2003, was his emphasis on constitutionalism and rule of law, which is directly relevant to security because that was how he provided a new vision after the, Sayyid Hassan had also mentioned, after the Saddam years of brutality, of atrocities, of violence, persecution. He, as representing those in Iraq who were the persecuted ones, he came out and said, no, we will go for rule of law. And he was, I think, the only possibly important Muslim leader anywhere in the world who created the environment where a democratic order in Iraq was set up. All these ways were to ensure that there's peace and security, and there's a model for the region. It was also important for the region. We had the Lebanese model, okay, divide the positions among different sects. We had other models of authoritarianism as well. But he said, one person, one vote. In fact, a short anecdote, I remember one of the leading scholars from US who were in Iraq talking about the democratic order. He said, when we went to see Ayatollah Sistani and we mentioned to him, this is a kind of a new outline of a constitution. He said, he looked at us and said, well, you are Americans. I am from Iranian heritage. Let's leave it to Iraqis. One person, one vote. And this gentleman who's a leading professor today in an American university, he said to me, I was speechless because what Sayyid said to me was the essence of democracy. So he built security through that model. Then he went to give a statement in the Amman message of bringing sectarian harmony. Today, his message stands for interfaith and I would say also intra-faith. And this also reminds me of this famous statement from Imam Jafar Sadiq, peace be upon him, somebody asked him, what should I do? Imam, I want to proselytize, I want to project religion. He kept quiet. He was asked the second time, the third time he was asked, and Imam said, well, try your level best. I'm paraphrasing, try your best not to say anything. Indirectly, he was saying, be through your actions an embodiment of peace. I think that's what Sayyid Sistani is doing. And that's the message of countering extremism, bringing people together. There are nuances, details of how to do counterterrorism, how to do counter extremism, but the core essence which is being showed here is interfaith harmony, bringing everyone together, inclusivity, and telling the region around them. Don't try to think of blocks and quotas and distributions among in terms of power. Come together for a common vision, and that's, I think, the best way to counter extremism and terrorism. Thank you.
Very, very well stated. Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Abbas. As I come to Sayyid Hassan on this, I just want to bring this down to our audience, to the people. The meeting has taken place. In fact, some of the images have even come back, and sometimes we've gotten some comments. People have said Sayyid Sistani looks sort of stoic, even in terms of his appearance and his demeanor. But I know many of us have visited and had the opportunity to meet Sayyid, and he's just so humble in his demeanor and such an amazing person. He stands up for everyone he greets. It could be a small group of youth like us when we were visiting him some years ago. It could be people who are well respected, irrespective of that. He shows the same reverence and respect. I was wondering, Sayyid Hassan, if you could just speak to the ethos of the ethics of how our scholars conduct themselves, how they carry themselves, and what about that? I mean, there's some of these stories and anecdotes that maybe the general public doesn't know about Sayyid Sistani looking after orphans, the poor of society, and him himself, as Dr. Abbas alluded to, just being very humble and ascetic in how he operates and how he lives. If you could kind of shed some light on the optics and how Sayyid Sistani carries himself historically, we'd appreciate it.
Well, as probably many of our audience who visited the holy city of Najaf have seen, how humble is the place where respected Sayyid Sistani and resides in that rented house. And I emphasize it's a rented house. Our beloved Grand Marja does not own any land or any property for himself. He always tries and emphasizes that he has to live the most humble and the simplest way possible, to be with the ranking of the lowest poor Shia Muslims and even non-Muslims probably around the globe as he's leading this narrative. He does not want to become above them in the humbleness and the simplicity of the life that he lives. Even there are different stories from some members of family and other friends who are living in the city of Najaf who mentioned in the time between 91 to 2003 where Iraq was facing sanctions and many people did not have access to different types of food, but our beloved Marja, because of his status, he used to receive gifts in terms of fruits or some types of food or even different types of gifts. However, he never accepted to actually taste them. He used to take them and immediately distribute them to his neighborhood and different neighborhoods where the different believers reside and different poor people and needy people are there. And even post 2003, he continued that. It is known that whenever any gift is given to the respected Sayyid, he immediately orders that this gift is directed towards the orphans. And as we know, the respected Sayyid ordered in 2005 that all the victims of terrorism that started in Iraq to be documented and the cases to be documented. And that was the establishment of one of the, if not the biggest charitable organization in Iraq, Al-Ain Social Care Foundation. When the Sayyid ordered that and they start collecting the data for the orphans and for the victims of terrorism, they realized the huge need for the help and support by the respected Grand Ayatollah. And then he ordered that immediately the organization to start working in the support and the charitable work for the orphan. Nowadays, there are more than 80,000 orphans are being supported and sponsored in that organization. And believe it or not, they are not limited to the Shia Muslims. They have Muslims and non-Muslims and even Christians who are sponsored in that organization. The Sayyid, even during the events of the terrorism that happened by ISIS and the Daesh in the North Iraq, he emphasized that the organization needs to be involved and help the displaced people from these cities, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of the faith, regardless of the sect that they belong to. So the Sayyid, throughout his life, he emphasized and made sure that he lives that simple life. And the way that the Sayyid sits down and receives his guests, is if we look at the pictures of all the ulama and the maraja from the past, we see that it's a similar way and a similar gesture where they put their hands on their thighs and they always look straight forward humbly, and they talk to the guests very humbly without raising their voice or making lots of gestures and reducing their body language. That's the way that most of the scholars and the ulama, they carry themselves in the Islamic seminary, out of respect and out of humbleness. And that's the impact of the real knowledge. When someone dives, and I'm very far away from this, I just look at the different scholars. When someone dives in the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt and the knowledge of the Holy Quran and they learn it and they keep teaching it for 60, 70, 80, 90 plus years, the only result that is expected from them is this humbleness, and the only impact that's expected from them is this humbleness. They reflect the akhlaq of Ahlul Bayt, the ethics of Ahlul Bayt, and the ethics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on this earth.
Very well stated. You reminded me that, these are students of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Rasulullah. Amir al-Mu'mineen was a student of Rasulullah himself, and reminded me of the story in the narration that were attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen that someone sent when he was the Khalifa of the Muslim world. They sent honey, very expensive honey from Ahwaz, and for Imam Ali. And when he saw it, he called on to the orphans of the town, and he began to feed them one by one with his own hands. And to the point that his companions said that we wish we were orphans that day, so we would get the honey from the hands of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And it's amazing how his students, or the people from the school of thought of the Hawza al-Ilmiya, reflect that. I remember a narration also from Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani, where he was referring to Amir al-Mu'mineen when he's ruling over this empire that today would be over 50 nations. He used to live so humbly that to the point that they asked him, "What is this?" And he says that I have a wish. And that wish is that I meet my Lord in a state of hunger, that I'm not on a full satiated stomach. And there should be no food or dinner table that is more simpler than mine, because I'll be accountable. And it seems that there are people who are holding up this banner as much as possible till this day and age in the way of our marja'iyah. Thank you so much, Sayyid. If I can come to Hajj Jalal on this idea, if you could kind of expand this forward and help us understand, what is the view, what is the vision of Shiaism and its respective institutions, and what is the worldview that it propagates? And perhaps that can help get us and shed some light on how do our scholars think, how do our institutions think, and how significant that is for us as Muslims in the West or in the East. Hajj Jalal, please.
Absolutely, and thank you, Sayyid Shabir, for that question. Sayyid Hassan and I speak extensively of this in the parts of our book which describe Shia Islam and Shia Muslims, and trying to make sure that the narrative of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam and the way they projected their message into the world, not just as an abstract concept or an idea, but practically. And here's an example of this, going off of the many beautiful examples that were just mentioned. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, in teaching us and what has been maintained of the heritage of Ahlul Bayt and how our scholars have formulated this understanding, they look to the example of Amir al-Mu'mineen, who was even at the helm during his khilafah, his caliphate, in the final years of his life, in which he ruled for just shy of 5 years. In his khilafah, he was known to be one who lived very humbly amongst people. And in one of the instances that's narrated is that Amir al-Mu'mineen was walking in the market. And while he was walking in the market, very unassumingly, and people not even realizing this is the Khalifa amongst them, he saw an elderly man begging. The man is going from one person to the next and he's being neglected and ignored. The Imam says, "What is this? Ma hadha? What is going on?" And one of the people in his midst says, "He's just a Christian." To that, the narration says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the Imam got extremely upset and scolded the people around them, saying, "How dare you use this man up in his youth and then neglect him in his old age? Go to the treasury at once and take care of every single one of his needs." That the Imam was so moved that someone that did not share his own belief, religion, or creed was neglected, was so hurtful to him. And this was also manifested through his instructions to all of his governors, particularly his governor Malik al-Ashtar, who was appointed to lead Egypt in the final part of the caliphate, in which he told Malik in letter 53 of Nahj al-Balagha, the Peak of Eloquence, which was compiled by the renowned scholar Sharif al-Radi in the 11th century, he said, "You are to treat people as one of two kinds, for they are one of two kinds, either your brother in faith or your equal in creation or humanity." This worldview, this vision of how we see people, something that Sayyid Hassan and I explained in the book with regards to something we call the 4 spheres of identity, which as individuals adhering to the school of thought of Ali ibn Abi Talib, of Shi'ism, of Shia Islam, they see themselves with this core identity of being a follower of Ahlul Bayt, and then also in the identity of sharing with their Muslim brothers and sisters, emphasized today through the many declarations of Sayyid Sistani, to not only look at Sunnis, to instructions to followers of Shia Islam, not to only look at them as their brothers, saying, "Do not say our brothers, but say ourselves." That within Islam, this shared identity and this common affinity to this beautiful religion. And then the sphere immediately above that being that the shared identity with everyone who believes in monotheism and the Abrahamic faiths. When Pope Francis made his pilgrimage today to the ancient city of Ur, this was another testament to this shared belief and identity that we have. We hold this belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one whom we look back to the Prophet Abraham, which all of the monotheistic faiths celebrate and cherish. This is something that we share in a common identity, and we have this affinity to one another because of this love of this oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bringing everything that we have back to that truth, that we're all here as servants and creations of God, trying to do the best we can in service of Him. And then finally, the 4th sphere of identity in which we see the world around us, regardless of one's belief or creed or background. At the end of the day, we are humans. We are human beings, and we belong to that family of humanity. Regardless of a person who is Catholic or a Muslim, a Christian or a Muslim, today's meeting between Grand Ayatollah Sistani and Pope Francis is something to be acknowledged, cherished, and placed a lot of importance on for its impact on the rest of the world. That religion, which has come to serve humanity and come to be a vehicle for humanity's perfection and excellence, is there so that humanity can coexist, so that humanity can reach its highest levels of excellence and live a beautiful life. This is what these individuals are standing for. And regardless of one is an adherent of these religions or any religion at all, this is something that definitely should be acknowledged and respected. And again, just to say that Shia Muslims will look at the world around them as one that they're constantly seeing, how can we contribute to making this world a better place? We have a responsibility by those that have come before us that made this world a better place. And especially in this era of occultation, as adherents of the faith await the return of Imam al-Mahdi, as well as Prophet Jesus, peace and blessings be upon them both. We're living in a time in which we see a huge responsibility on ourselves, and how do we continue to contribute and coexist and integrate within our societies to make it better than it was before.
Very, very well stated. Golden nuggets here. Building on this, let's put the conversation to Dr. Hassan Abbas, and building on this idea about the universal nature of this conversation, the universality of it. Christians, Jews, and otherwise, many others. For example, we may have colleagues and friends who have the name, for example, Jacob, but there's a counterpart to that in Arabic and in Islam of Yaqub, for example, right? Or Abraham, for example, Ibrahim, or for example, Moses and Musa. And for example, you'll have even Yahya or John the Baptist, for example. These are revered personalities in Christianity as well as in Islam. And one thing that was very significant is that the vicegerent of both individuals, if you take the counterpart of Christianity as well as Islam, Peter, or Saint Peter, being the vicegerent of Jesus, peace be upon him, from the Catholic narration, is buried in the Vatican, whereas at the same time, the counterpart of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, is buried in Najaf al-Ashraf. That is Imam Ali alayhi salam. I was wondering if you could shed some light for us, Dr. Hassan Abbas, on this idea of the significance of the personality of the Prophet's heir, that is Imam Ali alayhi salam, given that your book is coming out on this particular topic, and its connection to this meeting, that is the idea of the personality of Ali as taught from the Prophet that permeates the city of Najaf, and from the city of Najaf, the Hawza and the seminary of Najaf, and that from there to the globe. So what is the connection between Imam Ali and the Hawza, and perhaps this meeting at large? If you could shed some light on that, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And also listening to you and to my friend Sayyid Hassan Jalal is so inspiring. And I congratulate them on publishing this extraordinary work that they have just published. I had a chance to read it. Just a sentence on that. It's so crisp, so inspiring, so direct, and provides a great summary. I was reminded of a quote when Shabir, I was hearing your question, and also keeping in mind what Jalal just said and connecting with it. And I quickly opened my this advanced copy of my book, because there's a quote from Imam Ali which is so relevant, which is that in his final moments, when he was hit and he was in his last moments, his son Imam Hassan was standing by him, and his final statement to him was, and I want to read that because this is so pertinent here. He said to him, hold fast to the rope of God and avoid discord. I heard the Prophet saying the renewal of unity is better than all your prayer and fasting. Fear God with regard to those who have a right to your protection and hospitality. Fear God with regard to protection granted by your Prophet, and do not allow the dhimmi, non-Muslims, Jews and Christians, to be oppressed among you. This was the central message in his final moments, and it is so interesting that this is almost identical, or in terminology, to the very, very final moment of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he was in his last moments. I have mentioned both in the book, and when I see the legacy of Imam Ali today, especially in Iraq and elsewhere, among the scholars, among those who project and talk about him, do scholarly work about him, and Ayatollah Sistani being a very important scholar in that historic legacy as well, when he went out of his way to protect the Sunnis from ISIS, the Daesh, when he was able to support the Christians, that was the same message and tradition, is as if he had heard constantly he was hearing the call of Ali, and because he's right next to his shrine, I think constantly he's under that, following that message. The book, my book, is an effort to tell the story of Imam Ali today, not only because this is unknown, but because the beautiful message of Ali in terms of tolerance, in terms of kindness, in terms of relevance of justice, in terms of our ethos and values of equality and egalitarianism, those unfortunately, I'll not say buried under, but have been ignored because of the sectarianism, because of the violence, because of the sectionalism, if I may call that, globally. So the purpose was to bring those about again, present those based on sources from all major mainstream Muslim schools of thought, whether Sunni or Shia or among the mystic groups as well. And also produce this for the Western audience to tell them this is the essence of Islam as taught by the Prophet to Ali. Just a couple of words more on that. As you have rightly already mentioned, I'm immediately thinking of on Imam Ali on three layers. One is, of course, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, had said, Ali is to me what Aaron was to Moses. Significant statement. And he said in Ghadir, Man kuntu Mawla fahaza Ali Mawla. Whosoever thinks of me as their master, Ali is their master. And most importantly, if I may dare say, I'm a novice, I'm a learner, I'm a student of history, but while I say what inspired me the most was Ana Madinatul Ilmi wa Aliyun Babuha. When the Prophet says, I'm the city of knowledge, Ali is the door. We know that the prophetic mission is continuing, so the door has to remain open, and that door we have to make an effort to get in. And one sentence that I remember from my meeting with Ayatollah Sistani, Sayyid Hassan Heir was with me. We were together a few years ago, and when I asked Grand Ayatollah Sistani, can you guide me? I'm an academic, I'm a scholar, I have to look at these things from a scholarly perspective. What is your guidance for a scholar? And he gave me an answer which still I cherish it. If I'll say so regularly, it'll not be wrong. He said to me, please, he's always, he's very crisp and short and direct. He said, please don't project and present your opinions as facts. I think that's what inspired me throughout this work. I looked at everything, researched it, re-researched it, keeping my own views, at times even faith on the side. And that's what I've tried to do in this book. I'm sorry if I'm taking long, but my last point on this, I had realized that if I have to say 5 words in Imam Ali, and which are again so relevant to what happened in the meeting today, and the message that how I present what are the findings of Ali. I think Imam Ali stood for 5 things as taught to him by the greatest of all prophets and the greatest of the human beings who had ever lived, Prophet Muhammad: justice, egalitarianism, the principle that no one is above the law, because that defeats elitism and nepotism. And last but not the least, this freedom. There's no confining of the narrative, in a sense that there's no enforcement or imposition. It is free will. And these are not my words that I'm borrowing from Western tradition. I found those in Imam Ali's statements, sermons, in Nahj al-Balagha, and other great works. Thank you very much to give me the opportunity to talk about this.
Beautifully said. And oceans and pages can be filled on Imam Ali, and it still wouldn't do justice. But we greatly appreciate your effort in moving the literature in that direction. May Allah reward you for those efforts. You know, even the United Nations Arab Human Development Report in 2002 highlighted some of the principles of Imam Ali on good governance and how, you know, if nations were to follow these, we'd perhaps be in a better place. For example, the idea of taxation and development. Focusing on development and then letting taxation be a byproduct of that, as opposed to the other way around, and many of these things that can be talked about, and hopefully we'll talk about if time permitting. Sayyid Hassan, if I may come to you on this, just building on exactly this, I was wondering if you could tie in the ethos of Imam Ali as taught by Rasulullah, and kind of take us through the progression into the marja'iyya and the culture of the Hawza itself. These principles that, for example, Dr. Abbas has highlighted about, you know, justice, egalitarianism, you know, care and consideration for the marginalized, and all these dimensions of Imam Ali, seeming infinite ones. And I appreciate the, you know, encapsulating it in 5 and categorizing it. Could you kind of highlight for our audience, how do our scholars in the modern contemporary era embody these traits through some examples and how they approach the world? Sayyid Hassan, please.
So if we go back again to the book, the Pope Meets the Ayatollah, we'll find when we talk about the institution, and one of the reasons that inspired us, me and my colleague Hajj Jalal, to actually write this book, it was throughout our development in the charity work and in the faith-based work in the West. So both of us come from different backgrounds, and we resided in different countries. And as followers of the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt, we carry lots of ideas. And we thought, what are the things that Ahlul Bayt taught us to be able to live in wherever we are living or residing? And we start thinking about that and start digging. And why is it that the institution of the Hawza and the institution of these scholars and ulama doing what they are doing? And performing and having these ethos or different ethos that they are having. And so we start digging deep and reading throughout different books that are actually mentioned in the preface of the book to find out the answers. So it's not only about our beloved Imam Ali alayhi salam. It's actually, the story starts from Adam alayhi salam all the way to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he brought the seals of the messages, and after that, where the Imam started with our beloved Imam Ali alayhi salam, and the significance of our beloved Imam Ali, him being the student of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the direct students, and him being the best of the creations after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's the religious significance, and beside the other spiritual significance. But what I would like to shed the light, the political significance of our beloved Imam is he's the only Imam amongst the 12 Imams who had the ability to hold the top position in the state, as it's described nowadays, being the governor or the Khalif of the whole Muslim world for the few years that he was able to. And from these 4 years or so, we learn a lot of lessons that probably dear respected Dr. Hassan Abbas shed the light now in the conversation and in his book. I don't want to repeat. However, the principles carry on throughout all the Imams, alayhim salam, peace be upon them, and they instilled them in their community members, and they taught their community with different ethos and to carry this ethos throughout different generations. So when we see our beloved scholars and Maraja and the institution of the seminary, they are the carriers of this knowledge. So their main responsibility throughout the history, regardless of the different situations that they are in, regardless of the different states that they are in, regardless of the struggles that they are in, they have the main responsibility. How can they carry this knowledge, carry this ethos, carry this narrative, the narrative of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who passed them to the Imams, who hold the responsibility of protecting it and implementing it and guiding the humanity towards it, how they can also carry it as scholars and as the Imam described them as the narrators of the hadith throughout the different generations, and teach them to the people and deliver them to the humanity as a whole. So, as we saw today again in the meeting, and I don't want us to be repeating, but as we saw the humbleness of this meeting, the simplicity of this meeting, what Sayyid Sistani, may Allah prolong his life, actually presented in this meeting. So as we saw that all of us today in the different pictures, how the Sayyid stood for the Pope, and how the Sayyid actually received the Pope, and how he gave him the farewell, and how he sat down next to him. All these images have the high significance and shows the akhlaq and the ethics of respecting any human being. Brother Jalal, he talked about the different spheres of identity. If we pay attention to the Pope's speech in Ur, the city of Ibrahim alayhi salam, peace be upon him, and how he collected the different faiths within Iraq, and he tried to be as inclusive as possible. Yes, few faiths were missing. They were communicated to, but logistically it wasn't able. But the majority who were able to attend, and how he actually, and here I'm paraphrasing, the Pope mentioned that this is here the birth of monotheism and the Tawheed, and Ibrahim being the father of all these faiths. So this is what we describe in our book, the third layer of our identity. So the first layer being us, the community of the believers in the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt, and the second layer being us being part of and the core part of the Ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are not isolated. We are not a kind of a different faith from the Muslim Ummah. We are in the heart of it, and we can see in the statement of Grand Ayatollah Sistani, in some of the points that you guys can read and realize, he also encompassed the whole all the situation and the whole Ummah problems within that. He did not forget about the different causes of the Ummah, and also the third layer is what we share with those who believe in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Tawheed, the Abrahamic faith, and the core of the message of the Pope from that city, the city of Ur, that we are all are the children of Abraham, the children of Ibrahim, peace be upon them. And here the Sayyid, the respected Sayyid, our Grand Marja, he actually, if we go back to the message, he constituted the work for the faith leaders, and he gave a message to the all faith leaders. So here he carries the message of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the message of Ali alayhi salam, the message of the 12 Imams, and he's passing them to the faith leaders of the world, and constituting what we need to do as faith organization and as faith leaders and those who are working in the interfaith and the interfaith dialogue, what they need to do, what are their responsibilities in protecting the humanity, protecting the freedom of speech, as Professor Hassan Abbas mentioned, and protecting the simple rights of any human being globally.
Beautifully stated, Hassan. Thank you so much for that insight. And they're very valuable. You can just know the depth of the research that's gone into this work that you've put together, you along with Hajj Jalal. Thank you. Hajj Jalal, I wanted to come to you and ask about what is the precedent of tolerance and examples of tolerance that have existed in Islamic history. This is one symbolic meeting, but there must be a precedent before that must have occurred. And I was wondering if you could shed some light on that. What has been the precedent of Islamic, tolerance, coexistence that's existed in Islamic history? Any thoughts on that, please?
Absolutely. The history of coexistence, tolerance, and even this notion which Sayyid Hassan briefly spoke about, and also Dr. Hassan Abbas has mentioned, with regards to this idea of integration into society, and that Shia Muslims are taught that they are not to be isolated from society. This is a hugely important principle to understand, and we mentioned this in the book. There's a whole chapter dedicated to coexistence and integration. When we look at the corpus of Shia Hadith and the emphasis on Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam and Imam al-Baqir, the fifth and sixth Imams, peace and blessings be upon them both, when they say to their followers, do not remove your hand from the people, and if you remove your hand from the people, they lose but one hand while you lose many hands. People need each other. The Imam emphasizes to his followers, go to people's funerals, attend to their ill ones, go to the mosques and pray with people. People need each other. this emphasis that we're not here to promote an idea of mere self-containment, where as long as my community is sufficient, then we're good. But rather, it should be that there's this care for everyone in one society, regardless of their faith, their creed, and their background. Look to the example that was clearly established during some of the most critical times in the recent history in Iraq in 2007, when tensions were on an all-time high between some of the different groups in Iraq. Sayyid Sistani made this declaration, and he emphasized, he said, our call has always been for unity. I have said before, and I will repeat, do not simply refer to your Sunni brethren as brethren, but rather refer to them as your own souls. It is incumbent upon the Shia to fight for the social and political rights of the Sunnis before the Sunnis even fight for their own rights. I am the servant of all Iraqis, Sunnis and Shia, Muslim and non-Muslim. I love everyone, and this religion is a religion of love. The Grand Ayatollah's statement here is one that has been emphasized time and time again throughout Shia history. And his meeting with the Pope today was one that really brought this again to be crystallized in the world's eye, to see the beauty of Shia Islam, the beauty of Islam, and the beauty of all of these Abrahamic faiths. That the message is one. We are here to coexist. We are here to work with one another and try our absolute best. Of course, there's naturally going to be differences in approaches, differences in opinion, and that exists not just only on religious and religious levels and between schools of thought, but even within our own families we have disagreements. But we are taught to make sure that we care for one another and we're there for one another. Furthermore, when you look at the history of our Grand Maraja, and as well as going back to even the earliest days of Islam with the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in the Charter of Medina, in which there was differing groups, different religious factions that existed in the city of Medina. And the Prophet made sure that there was an agreement that was reached where people knew how to live with one another, tolerate one another, and coexist peacefully. That was the emphasis of the Prophet. The Prophet was known to be one who would walk in his neighborhood making sure that everyone was okay. The story of this elderly woman who was, of course, not a Muslim, used to trash the Prophet on a daily basis every time he walked by her house. And one day when he did not find the trash to greet him as he walked by her home, he was concerned for her well-being, would go into her home and I'm paraphrasing the story here, would find her ill and then ask to be one that can contribute to taking care of her and tending to her needs. And this is just yet another testament amongst the many stories, be it from the Prophet himself, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, and even our grand scholars in their engagement with people. The other recent example in the early 20th century with Sayyid Abdul Hussein Sharafuddin, one of the grand jurists from Jabal Amil in Lebanon, who had an amazing encounter and a series of letters and communications where he went to Al-Azhar and he met with the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar and spoke at liberty and in a beautiful intellectual discourse between the differences and the similarities and the commonalities that exist between the Sunni and Shia school of thought. And this would continue into letters of correspondence and would come to be compiled into a book known as Al-Murajahat, a beautiful work on understanding Shia-Sunni dialogue, not necessarily for promoting our school of thought in itself, but understanding how our scholars were always at the pinnacle of discussing and entering discourse in a courteous, intellectual, and polite manner, regardless of who they were talking to. So definitely there are a number of examples, and the historic visit of today with Grand Ayatollah Sistani, he is hugely admired and should be acknowledged for the monumental role that he has played, not only in Iraq, but across the world. Iraq is an example of a place that has been plagued by so many different troubles and tribulations. But look at where Iraq is today. Because individuals like Grand Ayatollah Sistani and his leadership, and encompassing all people from all different backgrounds, and emphasizing to the people that follow him religiously, listen, you are to make sure that you are taking care of the people that are outside of your school of thought, outside of your religion, before they even look to take care of their own needs. And this is coming from a history, a heritage, a school of thought that emphasizes its role in being guardians to the integrity of the message of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one that was embedded or has been embedded with the principles of coexistence, moderation, tolerance, and bringing all people together in the sake and the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's important for us to continue to realize that with all of these challenges that we're facing today in today's world, and what's to be seen next in the future of these meetings or any other events that we see with regards to the challenges within, be it in the Middle East, be it in the West or elsewhere, that we take lesson from this meeting today, and we are able to realize that in our communities, be it in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in the Middle East, in South Asia, wherever it may be in the world, that we take lesson from this meeting today, that if the leaders of these two monumentous faiths, where reportedly between these two schools of thought, there are over 1.5 billion followers worldwide. Between these two leaders, they were able to sit down, shake hands, embrace one another, and speak to one another heart to heart, and share these universal principles of coexistence, moderation, and working towards peace, working towards harmony within societies. Then regardless of if we are followers of these individuals or not, we should take inspiration from that and try to implement these in our own societies. And I believe through the work that we've done with this new publication, and it was an honor and a privilege to work on this book in such a timely way, The Pope Meets the Ayatollah, we emphasize this as the Shia school of thought, and in its worldview, is one that is promoting all of these values, is one that is encouraging not just in theory, in the abstract sense, for people to engage with one another, to integrate with one another while maintaining their principles. And this is an important point that I'd like to emphasize when it comes to this idea of integration. It's this emphasis on each community should be able to integrate and work and engage within society proactively without necessarily losing or taking away from its identity, regardless of where they are. And this was something that was encouraged and emphasized within the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt by the Imams themselves, and how they manifested those teachings to their followers. And I'll end with this small anecdote before we continue on, with one of the followers of Imam al-Sadiq, the sixth Imam. His name was Hamad. He goes to the Imam and he complains to him that every time he returns to the Muslim lands and visits his original homeland, people begin chiding him and begin harassing him, saying that you're going to be resurrected with those non-believers that you live with, because he had moved away for different reasons, for opportunity and what have you, with regards to his own family and his business. And he was complaining, venting to the Imam because of this. He was being chided by other Muslims. So the Imam asked him, "Oh Hamad, when you are over there in those non-Muslim lands, do you remember us? Do you remember our cause?" He said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, when you return here to the Muslim lands, do you remember us and remember our cause?" And he said, "No, I don't." The Imam then responded and told him, "Oh Hamad, you will be resurrected as a nation of your own, and light will be beaming before your hands." Again, just another testament to us with regards to the importance of integrating with one society, being one with those around us, engaging in one society, and maintaining their faith and maintaining the integrity of that divine message of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Thank you so much, Hajj Jalal, for that analysis and those insights. I'm seeing the comments that are coming in from our Muslims as well as our Christian friends and brethren and sisters, and it's really, really encouraging. This has been part and parcel of the ethos of Shia Islam since the beginning. The likes of the personalities that are common. Sometimes we say Judeo-Christian, but we don't say Judeo-Christian Muslim sometimes. And it's like saying there's three siblings, but you neglect a third one. Islam is just as Sayyid Hassan has highlighted, it starts from Prophet Adam alayhi salam, going all the way through the lines of the respective personalities. And the reverence that Islam has for the mother of Prophet Isa, that is Jesus, Mary, in the highest esteem regarded in the Quran, as testified by Surah Maryam and her mention there. There are numerous commonalities. I remember in university we had an interfaith with our Christian friends on campus talking about Prophet Jesus and Imam Hussein and the commonalities between their message. Numerous commonalities between John the Baptist or Yahya alayhi salam and Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and these parallels are endless. I'd invite you to consider taking this conversation to your communities wherever you may be watching, to really build these bridges the same way the Pope and the Ayatollah have built bridges today. It doesn't stop there. We continue and build these bridges in our own communities, in our own societies, wherever we may be, in the East or the West. That's really the harmony of this. As we wrap up and we conclude, I just want to take one question from the floor that's come. I want to give that to Dr. Hassan Abbas, and perhaps you can weave that into your closing remarks. And that is, what are the next steps? It's a very natural and excellent question that's come from the floor. This momentous meeting, this tremendous, remarkable, historic meeting has taken place, but what is next? What are the next steps and final thoughts on this meeting? Dr. Hassan Abbas, please.
Thank you so much. I think the first message that comes out of this, and the first thing that we can do, is to replicate this meeting. How can we do that? We should think about whether the imam of a mosque is meeting the father or the priest of the nearby church. I may also dare say, is the Shia scholar or Sunni scholar meeting the scholar from the other sect whose mosques may be at a walking distance from each other? Meeting helps. A meeting opens up hearts. Those holding hands, in a sense, the way we saw the Pope and the Ayatollah, is so inspiring. I think that's, if in a political sense, if I have to compare it, I'm immediately thinking about the meeting between President Reagan and Gorbachev, which had ended the Cold War. It's a political scene, but it's comparable. It had a huge impact. It ended the global war at that time. Although we couldn't get rid of war itself, which we should, but that's the message. Maybe that's the next step. What we have heard from and saw between these two great religious scholars. Also, if I may say, the second message that comes out of it, I think the central message embedded into the overall narrative between these two great leaders was supporting the persecuted, whether they are refugees, whether they are underprivileged, whether they're a religious minority, whether they're a minority which is not getting chance to project its message, whosoever they may be, standing by them. So last but not the least, we should think about, other than replicating this, and what I'm thinking of actually, when I see on this side, actually the house right, I see from my window is that of a Christian priest, a father of a church nearby. I'm seriously thinking I'm going to go to his home tomorrow. Maybe I'll go to Sunday to his mosque. Or maybe I should wait for my copy of my Pope Meets the Ayatollah and give the gift. So I encourage everyone who's listening, please buy this book and go to the nearby church if you are Muslim. And if you are a Christian, here I hope there are some. I saw some messages. Please buy this book and maybe go to a mosque nearby and give them to build that relationship. So the last point is, are we only talking, or we trying to do something? And I'll conclude with this quote from Imam Ali, again from my book, which is my favorite quote, and this ends my main point as well. Imam Ali said, knowledge calls upon action, knowledge and its practice must go hand in hand. Whoever is knowledgeable must act. Knowledge calls upon action. If it is answered, it will remain, but otherwise it will disappear. If we will not replicate this meeting through our own interfaith and intrafaith meetings, this beautiful moment will slip away from our hands. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan Abbas. And building on, maybe on another time we can talk about the significance of Imam Ali and his above polemics, above the Shia-Sunni divide, and the intra-faith conversation between our brothers across the aisle. Inshallah, another time. If I can come for closing remarks from Sayyid Hassan as well as Hajj Jalal on the significance of this meeting, the next steps, and what this all means. If you could tie it up with some closing remarks, Sayyid Hassan Al-Hakeem, please.
I would like to build on what Dr. Hassan Abbas concluded, the whole concept of practice and knowledge. Today, our grand leader, our grand marja, he showed us that we, as active citizens of our countries, wherever we reside, as the followers of schools of Ahlul Bayt, who live in different countries, as active residents of and citizens of these countries, that we have a responsibility. As we see, there's a narrative going around in different countries that the faith is the reason and the core reason for any war and any terrorism or any violence. Today, we were able, as a people of faith, as people who follow the faith, and our leaders were able to show the world that actually the faith was the reason that peace was there in Iraq, and the faith was the reason that the minorities were protected in a country like Iraq. Iraq being the birthplace of different faiths, the birthplace of the Abrahamic faith. So our leaders showed us by action, and they translated their knowledge into action. So now we, as citizens of these countries, also we need to follow these steps, and we need also to show through our knowledge of the faith and through practicing the faith, show the actions that we are the carriers of peace, and we are peaceful people, and we are moderate people. We are against violence, and wherever we reside, wherever we are citizens of whatever country we are in, we are the people who bring peace to the table.
It's heartwarming. Thank you so much, Sayyid Hassan. We're seeing the video clips that are coming out of the meeting from Sayyid Sistani and the Pope, the very heartwarming images of them holding hands, a symbolic gesture that resonates throughout the globe. And from the Islamic perspective, as follows Ahlul Bayt, neighbors are 40 houses, east, west, north, south, and we're liable for each one if we have our things taken care of. And that doesn't matter if the person's Muslim, not Muslim. And really, you see this embodied in the personality of Sayyid Sistani, as well as the Pope, reflecting that here in these heartwarming images. A final statement from Hajj Jalal, Moughania, on this idea of the significance of this meeting, the next steps, and where can we go from here. That the conversation doesn't stop here. In fact, it begins. And where can we build from there? Hajj Jalal, Moughania, please.
Of course, and I wanted to also thank our dear respected Dr. Hassan Abbas for his comments and for sharing all this insight. I'm currently reading his book published by Yale University Press, The Prophet's Heir, and I encourage everyone to get their copy. It is definitely a scholarly and academic publication that many will benefit from, regardless of their background, and understanding the life and legacy of Ali ibn Abi Talib. In addition to that, I wanted to say that when it comes to bringing all of this together, like Sayyid Hassan mentioned so eloquently, and Dr. Hassan Abbas, this meeting is a testament for what religion stands for and for what religion is all about. In one of our meetings with the Grand Ayatollahs in the holy city of Najaf, and this particular meeting was one of the colleagues of Grand Ayatollah Sistani, Grand Ayatollah Sheikh Ishaq Fayyad. He mentioned to a group of young professionals and students, he said as a piece of advice on how they should conduct themselves as ambassadors of their own faith and representatives of their own faith. He said, be that straight line and all the rest of the crooked lines will be shown. If we take a look at this, Grand Ayatollah Sistani today and Pope Francis today in their meeting and what they've done and what they've stood for and what Grand Ayatollah's leadership has been over the many years though there may be people that speak in the name of the faith, they do not represent it. And Sayyid Sistani and the individuals that stand for the true teachings of the religion merely conduct themselves and lead without necessarily needing to point anyone out. Be that straight line, and all the rest of the crooked lines will be shown. I believe that this is a testament for us and an example for us in our own societies, in our own communities, so that we can be those straight lines. Again, inspired from this long heritage and this deep doctrine and teachings from Ahlul Bayt, where Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam said, "Kunu du'atan lana bighayri alsinatikum." Be a call unto us without your tongues. Be that example, so that we are truly contributing to our societies in a positive, impactful way, and that we're not interested in proselytizing or converting people to our faith or our way, but instead we wish to be good neighbors, we wish to be good colleagues, we wish to be ones who are existing and contributing to our societies and living with people in that way. There are many people that have been sharing messages with us asking for prayers. On behalf of our panel, I will say that inshallah, all of those who need our prayers in this blessed day, in this blessed occasion, please keep everyone in your prayers that are in need of it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take care of all of our ill ones, to the many people that are suffering from sickness and illness, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give His endless grace and blessings to all of the people of the world, all of the people who are in need, all of the people who are less fortunate, all of the people that are going through their own challenges and suffering, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to protect us and guide us and bring us closer to Him, and ultimately bring us all closer to one another.
Beautifully stated, Hajj Jalal, and to all our panelists, Dr. Hassan Abbas and Sayyid Hassan Al-Hakeem, thank you all very much. I'd just like to close with the statement to remind our audience that in the early days of Islam, one of the first dominions to give a sanctuary to Muslims was actually the Christian dominion of Abyssinia in modern-day Ethiopia. It was the King Najashi who gave a safe haven to early Muslims who were heavily persecuted in the early days. And it's good to see that that tradition and that lineage is still alive in the representation of the meeting with the Pope and the Grand Ayatollah. We thank you all for tuning in, and we'd invite you to carry this conversation on social media, on YouTube, Facebook, and beyond into your respective communities. Thank you so much for joining wherever you are across the globe. May you be with peace and harmony and existence the same way that the Pope and the Ayatollah embody. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
More about this historic meeting with the Grand Ayatollah and on Shia Islam, order your copy of the new book, The Pope Meets the Ayatollah, An Introduction to Shia Islam, available now on Amazon.